Never propose on an escalator, because you never know which will come first, tomorrow or the unexpected. The mall quickly called 911, and the fire department arrived soon after. Preliminary assessment suggested that a technician had failed to reinstall the steps properly after maintenance. A woman was kneeling beside the escalator, repeatedly calling out her boyfriend's name. Firefighters gently moved her aside to make space for the rescue. One firefighter climbed into the inner mechanism of the escalator to check the man's condition. He still had a pulse and could speak, a small miracle amidst disaster. The firefighter told him to stay absolutely still and remain conscious while he crawled deeper to assess the injuries. But the moment he saw the wound, he fell silent. The drive chain was caught around the man's femoral artery. It looked like it had been severed. Releasing the pressure recklessly might make it worse. Right now, the pressure from the hinge was acting like a tourniquet, keeping him from bleeding out. But they couldn't leave him like this either. The captain gave the order to rescue him as quickly as possible. They prepared an IV, tied a tourniquet on his leg, and then used hydraulic shears to cut through the drive chain and remove it from his body. With coordinated effort from the firefighters, the man was soon freed, and the surrounding crowd broke into applause. The man, barely holding on, looked up and asked if his girlfriend had said yes. Seeing the ring on her finger, a firefighter smiled and told him she said yes. Hearing this good news, the man suddenly began convulsing and let out his last breath. His blood pressure crashed, his breathing weakened, and within 3 seconds his pulse and heartbeat stopped. There was likely internal bleeding as well. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, given the on-site conditions, there was nothing more they could do. As one rescuer continued chest compressions, a teammate gently tapped his shoulder and told him the man was gone. A day that was meant to be joyful had turned into a moment of heartbreaking farewell. So cherish the one in front of you, because you never know whether tomorrow or the unexpected will come first. An ATM spat out a note begging for help, but the woman who received it didn't even glance at it. She turned and tossed it straight into the trash. Next came an elderly man in a suit. After withdrawing cash, he too received a plea for help, with someone shouting for rescue from inside. Suspicious, the man thought it might be a prank show, so he threw the note away as well. Soon after, another young woman arrived. This time, the trapped person had learned their lesson, blocking the cash slot and handing out another note. It read, "Stuck in ATM, no cash until call 911. The woman had no choice but to call emergency services and explained that the ATM was asking her to call the police. The dispatcher was baffled until she clarified that someone seemed to be trapped inside the machine, and she could now hear cries for help.
Inside the machine? Are you sure?
I'm sure I don't have my money.
Before long, firefighters arrived on the scene. The responding patrol officers had already figured out the situation. A technician had come in the morning to service the bank vault. His car was still in the parking lot, and his phone had been left on the passenger seat. It seemed he had been accidentally locked inside the vault, with no way to call for help. Two firefighters exchanged a glance and decided to investigate further. They first inserted a search camera into the ATM, and sure enough, saw the technician inside. Looking at the welded hinges on the vault door, they knew there was only one way. They grabbed an electric saw to cut through the hinges, then wedged a crowbar into the door seam. With the two of them applying force together, the vault door was finally pried open. They quickly stepped aside, counted down, 3, 2, 1, and let go. Inside, the technician was drenched in sweat but finally freed. Even for seasoned firefighters, this was a rescue scene unlike any they'd ever seen before. Never buy one of those inflatable castles, because with just one strong gust of wind, you might end up flying into the sky. Just moments ago, a father threw a birthday party for his son and used his money power to buy a flashy inflatable castle. Seeing how much fun his son was having, the father jumped in too, bouncing around happily. Unaware of the hidden danger beneath their joy, each time the father jumped, the stakes anchoring the castle to the ground were being loosened. He had no idea that his next big bounce would cause disaster. With one final leap, the metal stake popped out of the ground, and the entire castle tipped over. To make things worse, a sudden gust of wind swept in from above, catching the tipped structure and hurling the inflatable castle straight off a cliff. Just when everyone thought it was all over, the bouncy castle surprisingly began to rise again, gliding away on the wind like a giant balloon. The fire department rushed to the scene. They planned a cliff descent to rescue the victims below. Thanks to the cushioning effect of the castle, the two kids were unharmed. But the father wasn't so lucky. He had been flung out and was lying on a pile of rocks. The captain checked for signs of life, and miraculously, he was still alive. With the help of the firefighters, all three were brought safely back up. Let's just hope that next year's birthday doesn't involve an inflatable castle. The female officer arrested every passenger on the plane all by herself. Strangely, not a single one resisted. Instead, the crowd erupted in applause, praising her for doing the right thing. Just moments ago, a passenger jet tragically crashed near the coast, but the airline, trying to avoid responsibility, detained all passengers under the pretense of investigating the cause for 8 hours. When the female officer arrived inside the cabin, she discovered someone tied up with tape over his mouth. The air marshal claimed the man had assaulted an officer, so he had restrained him. But nearby passengers refuted that and said the air marshal was twisting the truth. Everything had been caught on video. In the footage, the man had tried to leave because his father's body was still in the cargo hold, likely soaking in seawater and decomposing. He pleaded with the air marshal, desperate to bury his father in peace, but the marshal suddenly struck him down, claiming he was ignoring orders. After watching the video, the officer's expression turned cold. She first removed the tape from the man's mouth, then demanded to know who had given the order to detain all the passengers. The air marshal said it was the airline CEO. That answer enraged her. The air marshal's badge belonged to the Los Angeles Air Marshal Service, yet he was following orders from an airline executive.
Your knees pressing against the seat in front of you because they want to add 3 extra rows and you're on their side. 5 damn peanuts in that bag and you're on their side. Oh, no. Not today. Because we both know that it is perfectly safe for these people to get off the plane. I don't give a damn what the CEO says.
The passengers erupted in protest. The officer knelt down to untie the man, but the marshal tried to intervene again.
No, you didn't just grab my shoulder. Don't make you do what? You place your hand on my shoulder again, we're gonna have a big problem.
He ended up awkwardly scratching his head. Since he accused the man of assaulting an officer, she said she would now take over the case for assaulting an officer against him. But that wasn't all. She declared she would be arresting all the passengers, meaning they were now officially under her protection.
You are all under arrest, and that means that you are all leaving this plane.
The passengers broke into loud applause, cheering for the righteous officer. Just because a rubber hose got kinked, a man almost died in his own attic. He borrowed a foam machine from a friend to install insulation, but being a first-time user, he accidentally kinked the rubber hose while laying it down. Sure enough, it got stuck at the kink shortly after he started. Thinking the pressure was too low, he kept pressing the remote to increase it. Foam built up at the kink until it suddenly burst open. The rubber hose snapped back with such force that it knocked him to the ground, and he passed out. The foam machine kept spraying nonstop, and soon he was buried alive in foam.
911, what's your emergency?
It's my brother. He was in the attic and I think he's had an accident.
What kind of an accident?
I don't know. I can't get to him.
Looking at the overflowing foam, firefighters realized they couldn't enter through the entrance, so they used the prodding method to locate him. They slammed long poles into the ceiling until they found the man's position. Luckily, there was a lift in the room. They positioned the lift under him and started cutting around the edges of the ceiling. His sister watched nervously, fearing the firefighters might accidentally cut her brother in half. Fortunately, the rescue went smoothly. After lowering the lift slowly, firefighters stood the entire ceiling panel upright. The team smashed through it frantically and removed the ceiling, finally saving the man. Paramedics quickly gave him oxygen, chest compressions, and artificial ventilation. When he woke up, his first words were about wanting to go back and help. His sister tearfully told him that as long as he did not die in front of her, that was the biggest help he could give.
Like a big brother.
You know what would be helpful? To not almost die on me. Never do that again.
Okay. Is the house okay?
We'll talk about it later.